You know, it's easy to harp on about how there's no single ultimate weapon superior to everything else, except, of course, the FN P90. It's a little bit more difficult to objectively rate weapons by arbitrarily assigning stat points, semi-arbitrarily. I've done this before, but expanded and improved a little bit, and now, by the power of overthinking, we're at 10 criteria. I'm just going to quickly explain what I have in mind here. I was thinking back and forth between splitting it into offense and damage, or stopping power, or power in general, because there is a little bit of a difference. Offense I see as how easy it is to threaten someone, how easy it is to bypass their defenses. Some weapons can have excellent offense, but not the highest damage, or not the highest incapacitation factor, or whatever you want to call it. My goodness, that sounds nerdy. So for example, if you take a rapier, super high offense, pretty difficult to deal with. But if you think about a light rapier with a very narrow blade, stopping power isn't that great. Yes, the thrust may be highly lethal if it punctures a lung or another organ, maybe even the heart, but it's not going to make the opponent drop just like that, as opposed to, say, chopping off a leg, which is definitely ending the fight right then and there, let alone a head. Some weapons are more difficult to block or parry just because they have so much mass that they might just crash through your defense, in which case they also have better offense. So I decided against overcomplicating it, so I'm just rolling it all into offense, so taking all of that into account. Defense, can the opponent circumvent it? How solid is your block? Things like that. Ease of use, self-explanatory. Anti-armor, also self-explanatory. Same as speed, reach. Versatility means things like how many different options do you have with it? Does it have more than one means of attack? Can it still be used while grappling, etc.? Durability, again, pretty self-explanatory. Affordability, yeah, how cheap is it? And ease of carry. Can you carry it on your person, or how much is it going to get in the way if you had to haul around in everyday life? Can you conceal it? That would also go into it. Let's start with the humble stick. Like an Eskrima stick, for example, made of wood, not metal, and not super long for single-handed use. Offense, that's all right. Not great, not terrible. Defense, same kind of deal. It's all right. It's definitely usable, quite handy in a number of ways, but compared to a lot of other weapons, not amazing. Ease of use. It's a stick. Stick go bonk. There's really not much to think. Of course, there are techniques and everything. You can get fairly complex with it, but you don't have to. It's a stick. Enough said. Anti-armor capability. A helmet may be protective, but getting clobbered in the head with a stick, still not particularly pleasant. But there is plenty of armor that would make you not really respond to it all that much. And like a gambeson, any kind of padding, it just doesn't have the mass to do all that much. Speed. It's light. There's not even a weight at the end. You can swing it as fast as your arm allows, basically. So, pretty good. Reach, of course, depends on the stick, but middle ground. Versatility, well, you whack 'em with it. You can thrust with it. It's not super effective. It allows for different hand positions, different grips, so there's some things you can do with it. It's not exactly a complex multifunctional design. Durability, it's okay. I mean, it's made of wood. You could argue it should be even lower, but I mean, if it's decent wood and if it's thick enough, it's all right. Like if a sword cuts into it, of course it's going to be damaged, and it can break, but it's not fragile as such. Affordability, well, what more do you want? You can make it yourself. You can get it for free. You can pick up a branch. I mean, if it was literally a tree branch, some of the other stats would be lower, like durability, but either way, it's cheap. Ease of carry, it's not bad. You can fit it into a pocket, but it's not much of an inconvenience to carry it around. You can just slip it through a belt or tie it to something or whatever, and it's not really going to get much in the way. So that leaves us with a total score of 30.5, whatever that's worth. We'll see later. Now for direct comparison, Nunchucks. Let's see how that shakes out. Offense. debatable, but I would argue slightly more than the stick. Why? Because it's more difficult to see where it's coming from. Like, you can be a little bit more deceptive with angles, and you can potentially get around something. Not as well as with a flail, as we'll see later. I don't think it does more damage than the stick, but it's trickier. It's just a little harder to keep track of it and see it coming. So probably more likely to get hit by it. Just a little bit. Defense, a little bit worse than the stick because you have less to work with. Sure, you can hold it out and just pull the chain taut and try to defend that way, but it's just not as structurally sound as with the stick. Of course, if you hold the stick by both ends, you have way more structure there. You can resist more powerful strikes and everything. There are some other things you can do. I've seen blocks where you hold both handles in one hand and use it like a shorter stick, but again, at that point, it's shorter. You have less to work with, so it's a little bit more challenging to defend yourself. Not impossible, obviously, and maybe a Nunchaku expert who's really good with it would say it deserves more points, but that's how I see it. Anti-armor, same deal as a stick. It's okay, not the most effective, but not bad. Speed, in my opinion, just a little higher than the stick, because I've seen some really impressive tricks where someone just whips it forward lightning fast. It's, as I said, hard to see it coming, and I feel like even though it's pretty close, because obviously you can swing a stick very fast, there are some ways to build momentum and keep the momentum going and then suddenly snap out with nunchucks that you can't do quite the same way with a stick. And the next one is reach, slightly shorter than the stick. It's very similar, really. Nunchucks are essentially, the way I see it, the same length. Like, if you pull them out, it's the same length. But it seems that most of the time, the nunchucks are held a little bit higher. On second thought, I really can't claim that. There are many different hand positions, some higher, some lower, but I already went with that rating. So let's just say this stick is just a little bit longer. It's only half a point anyway. Versatility, I rate the same as the stick, even though it's different. So there are some things you can't do with it, like thrusting, for example. Sure, you can do it, but only with one handle. There's no solid structure connecting the two. So however far you're holding out one handle, you'd get twice as much with a one-piece stick. Then you have such pitiful reach that it's not as effective as thrusting with a stick to someone's face or whatever. Again, it's not the most effective thing to do anyway, but against certain target areas, it's pretty good. So you can't do that, but then there are other things you can do, like wrap it around, even choke with it. There are some additional options you have. Even trivial things like pinching someone's fingers between the handles. I've seen a bunch of neat little tricks. So it loses some and wins some. Actually, hang on. I'm going to give it another half point because you can use them as chopsticks, as Jackie Chan has shown. Damn it, I can't find a single screenshot or anything. I have a distinct memory as a kid of watching a Jackie Chan movie where he's trying to pretend the nunchucks he's carrying are actually chopsticks, so he's trying to eat rice with it. Am I hallucinating that? Does anybody know what movie I'm talking about? Anyway, not seriously, but I think there are probably a few more things you can do with nunchucks compared to a stick, because really the only thing I can think of that a stick can do differently is a set thrust, and as at the defense, but we've already covered that in the other stats. More shenanigans with nunchucks. Now, durability. This is something that I do not remember hearing anyone point out, and just while poring over the stats, it just occurred to me that the durability is much higher than a stick. So I rate it as almost max. Why? Well, think about trying to break a stick over your knee. Right, you hold each end, you try to snap it over your leg. But now imagine sawing this into two halves, and now you try to break each individual half. Not so easy, is it? And because there's a flexible connection, if you hit something, like if you strike something really hard with this stick, the stick can flex and break, beyond a certain point. That's not going to happen with these. You cannot, these are almost indestructible. I only don't rate them at full 5 points because it's still wooden handles, so they can still be damaged, like particularly against blades and whatnot. But overall, way harder to break than a stick. Now, affordability, a little bit less than a stick, just because there's metal involved. You know, like, they're still very, I mean, maybe barely more affordable. Like, you could still have them for free, essentially. It's just, it's going to take a little bit longer. You could even argue for 5 because you can literally just get 2 pieces of wood, drill holes in them, and tie them together with whatever, and there you go. But if you did that, then some of the other ratings would be a little bit lower. I'm assuming chain for defense. If it was just a rope, it would be even lower. So let's stick with that. Ease of carry, pretty damn good. Almost full score. And they fold up nicely. You can stuff them in your pants. You can conceal them. They're much easier to carry around than most other things. That's one of the main strengths, really. That leaves us with a total score of 30. Only half a point less than the stick. Oh no, controversy intensifies. Or not, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe I'd be accused of being a fence sitter. But then again, a fence can be made of sticks, so not sure I can commit to that. Next, a short war flail. This one happens to be Chinese. Pretty simple affair. So basically nunchucks with different proportions, perhaps a little bit more metal, like reinforced iron tip. Offense, a little bit more than both the stick and nunchucks. Because for one, it might hit just slightly harder, as I said, if it has reinforced tip perhaps. But even if not, there are some things you can do a little bit better with this. Like, you can get around the opponent's defense. Like, imagine you're striking with the end of the main handle, like that's what it hits the opponent's defense, whether it be a shield or another weapon, and then the flail bit comes whipping around. So you might be able to hit them behind that. So it's going to be a little bit trickier to defend against. Defense, not great. Better than nunchucks, worse than the stick because you have less to work with. You would only be able to block with the main handle, so it's shorter than what the stick would offer. Ease of use, right between nunchucks and the stick. It's not as tricky as nunchucks, and you can't hit yourself as easily with it because the striking end is further away from you, especially further away from your hand and all that. And it's not quite as simple as just clobbering someone with a rigid stick. You have to know about the follow through, but even if you mess that up, it's not going to punish you as much as a flexible weapon with a shorter handle. Anti-armor, a little bit better than stick and nunchuck. Not amazing because it is a small one, so there's only so much you can do, but pretty decent. I could rate it a little bit higher, but compared to some of the other weapons that are coming up later, it has to be just slightly below them. Then speed, same as a stick. I don't think there's really a significant difference. Reach, also same as a stick, 2.5. Versatility, similar to nunchucks. There are also some ways you can kind of sneak around the guard. There's some tricks you can't do with that as much as with nunchucks, but then again, you could thrust with that if you had to, and you would have a little bit more to work with. And I feel like with these large metal rings, just shoving those in someone's face in a thrust would be reasonably effective. Durability, better than the stick for the reasons I mentioned before, but not quite as good as the nunchucks because there is a longer handle. So that one is more likely to break. I mean, not really all that likely. Maybe I should give it one more. 4 seems reasonable enough. Because I said, with this loose connection there, it's very difficult to really break this. So, especially on impact, it's not really happening. It can still be broken if you're trying to defend with it. So there's that. Not quite as cheap as a stick, but still cheap. Basically like nunchucks, but I need to give it a slightly lower rating because there's more material, as said, especially if there is iron at the end as well. Ease of carry, almost like the stick, but a bit lower. It's shorter overall, but then you've got that dangly bit there, and it doesn't fold up quite as neatly as nunchucks, I would argue. So if you stick it through your belt or whatever, then you have the top part. You have to also tuck that in, or otherwise it's dangling around. It's just slightly less convenient. Not a big deal, but slightly less. Which leaves us with an overall score of 30.5. So identical to the stick. And that shows you that this, like the final score is to be taken with a sack of salt. Because like personally, I would rather have a short war flail than a stick. It is more effective overall. It's losing points by being slightly harder to use and costing marginally more, which is not really that relevant. So I feel like I should weigh these differently, but we're just going to do it like this for now. And it does lose slightly on the defensive side, but overall, I pick it over a stick. And over nunchucks too. Next, we've got an odd one, the Chinese Meteor hammer. I don't know for sure how much this was used in real fights, if at all. If anyone has sources on that, please let us know in the comments. But you could, of course, use it. So, let's see. Offense. I feel like this would be tricky to defend against. Because it can... Again, flexible weapons are a little bit harder to predict. It can come from strange angles, and even if you're defending against it, it can kind of whip around and hit you anyway, at least if you're defending statically. I find if you cut or strike into the chain, like as it comes, you're knocking it aside, then it doesn't really threaten you much. But there are some ways that make it a little bit more challenging. But that goes both ways. It's also very hard to defend with. Maybe it's just my lack of experience with this kind of weapon, but when I think about it, really the only way you can effectively defend is by just holding the chain taut and trying to catch a strike on the chain, which is possible but not easy and much harder than with any of the other weapons. Again, maybe an expert with this weapon would rate it more highly, but compared to everything else on this list, this is without a doubt the worst defensive tool. I mean, you can't actively defend with it. With a stick, you can attack at the same time and displace the opponent's weapon by just kind of striking into it. You can't do that here. You can just hold the chain and hope for the best. That's how I see it, at least. Then, next up, ease of use. Well, guess what? Pretty difficult. Requires extensive training to know what to do with it and not hit yourself or get entangled with it. Even just the most basic strikes, a little bit more challenging with this. Anti-armor, pretty good. I would compare it to the Flail. The weights at the ends may have a little bit less mass. It depends on exactly which Meteor hammer you're looking at. I've seen different shapes and sizes, but some of them are more like an enhanced chain in my book rather than a flail. Like a ball flail would hit way harder than these, I think. The speed, I imagine, is pretty good. It doesn't quite reach nunchuck levels just because it's a longer chain to work with. I mean, you can choke up on it, of course, but I've seen faster movements with nunchucks. Reach, well, you just gotta let it have the full score. I mean, if you extend it as far as it goes, the entire length of the chain, basically, you can certainly reach very far with these. So, yeah, versatility, 1.5. There are definitely some shenanigans you can do with that. In fact, there's some pretty neat tricks. You can entangle the opponent. You could perhaps wrap it around limbs, and there are some things you can definitely do with this that you cannot do with others at all. But vice versa, there are also plenty of things that you cannot do with these. Then again, maybe you should get 2 points. Just being able to wrap it around things is pretty handy. Durability, I wonder. A chain with weights, all made of metal. I mean, try to destroy this. Maybe chain links could break, but that would take a lot. I feel like this is baseline indestructible unless the ring that connects the weight to the chain breaks, but that can apply to a number of other things. So, yeah, virtually indestructible is what I would guess. Affordability is also pretty high. Not quite as high as a stick, but yeah, it's a chain with weights, so costs a little bit more, but you don't have to be rich exactly. And then ease of carry, well, you roll it up and stick it in your pocket. If you have two spiky balls, it's a bit more of a hassle, I suppose, but overall, a more compact package than anything else. So there you go. Which leaves us with a surprisingly high score of 31. Not what I would have expected. I mean, again, I should probably weigh these a little bit differently. The extremely low defense is quite a problem. I would not pick a Meteor Hammer over any of the others. This entire recording session, fully edited, was still almost an hour long, and in a poll, a slight majority voted in favor of splitting it up into multiple parts. So keep an eye out for the next part, which will be up a day or two after this. Hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.